When it comes to FNAF fan games, there are a couple of elements that most try incorporating with their own games, most notably borrowing mechanics from the original FNAF series, whether this is the use of the doors feature, adding a flashlight, or even a vent system. So, with all these together, there are many different ways of trying to make your specific fan game feel like its own experience and not just another clone. August 20th. 2022. JR's was a game that was highly anticipated, with many people excited to see what this new fan game was going to be about. Just look at the teasers. These animatronics were heavily inspired by the original cast, but as the original definitely tried to stick to a more child-friendly establishment, since as we all know, these are from a family-friendly pizzeria, Purple Guy certified. JR's decided to take these designs and make them absolutely terrifying. I personally never played the game until making this video, since it gave me an excuse to not only review the game, but also spend some time doing a really deep dive into every single aspect. To start off, to really show why everyone was so excited to play this game for themselves, we need to look at the second trailer that is simply called JR's FNAF Fan Game. And well...
I know it's been difficult. This line of work certainly isn't the easiest, or the prettiest. But we have a new lead on the Juniors investigation. I just need to know if mentally you're up for the challenge.
To say that this was something different was an understatement. People saw this and saw a quality that very few FNAF fan games managed to accomplish. The only one in my mind that I could currently think of possibly being the Joy creation. But other than that, nothing. This was going to be the FNAF fan game that was going to create a new precedent of what kind of things fans would expect from future installments, creating visually stunning designs with the environment and effects while portraying a terrifying and unknown story. This is going to be the game that would cause you to stay awake at night. This was Juniors.
We've been chasing this investigation non-stop, I know, but trust me, this is it. We need to go back. Back to Juniors.
So obviously, when this game finally came out, it was very widely mixed. Wait, let me read that again. When JR's was released, public reception was mixed. Huh. Okay, so before we actually start the review of the game, there were some very polarizing opinions of JR's. On one side, people were saying that the game was an absolute gem, and it was going to create a new standard for all new future FNAF fan games out there, citing it to be an actual 10 out of 10, with the opposite side basically saying, yeah, it's pretty and visually impressive, but the gameplay was horrible. This was surprising considering I've never seen any actual gameplay about this game yet, nor do I actually know anything about it other than how creepy the animatronics look. So, with all of this, let us actually start by playing the game for ourselves in order to see how good it actually is. This is the story of Juniors, the disappointing, pretty masterpiece. Starting this game off, we get this choice where we could just jump straight into it or get a rundown of the tutorial. If you've been with the channel for a bit, you know how much I hate tip boxes on screen, so this was actually something that I loved. These kinds of tutorials where we aren't told what to do with floating imaginary boxes, but instead with the instructions on a piece of paper add to the immersion of the game. Simply put, we are an investigator, so having this is kind of like some sort of boss letting us know how to do our job. We are told that we need to find out who's possessed, first by checking the camera systems, then looking for flickering lights or handprints on camera lenses, then finally marking the possessed animatronic on the laptop. It seems pretty straightforward, and I do enjoy the adorable designs of the three animatronics afterwards. We are now told to keep the robot safe by checking the animatronic's stability from time to time, then call the animatronics to the conveyor belt for repairs when it gets too low. However, it's important to know if the animatronics are haunted before doing so, because something bad might happen. Which is when we're thrown into this cutscene. This art style is very appealing to me, and this sort of cutscene does remind me of the ones within A Shadow Over Freddy's, another unique fan game. I'm not saying that they ripped them off, not at all, just that these two had a very similar art direction. It's also important to state that animating actual cutscenes shouldn't really be a priority for these kinds of games, and just using static images is way more than enough to establish a really engaging story, since they already do a well enough job to portray what's happening. Our character is panicking, not knowing where they are, assuming that they are dead at first, feeling completely empty inside. That is when we encounter our favorite doopy looking bear. To say that I was expecting a free roam section with a brain as the moon would be a complete lie. The graphics reminded me of some sort of old Nintendo 64 game, kinda like Connor's Bad Fur Day, which only made me enjoy this section even more since it was almost nostalgic, making me feel like I played this game before when I've never even touched it. We walk towards a thing who is called Paul Bear, and apparently in a place called the Barrens, a line between life and death. It seems that we are alive, but now have access to this world, when I'm assuming we're sleeping since there's a bed behind him. Paul Bear called us here in order to help him to do some things in the living world, so he could finally move on to the afterlife. It's a win-win situation for both of us, since he knows JR's quite well, and as a paranormal investigator, we were hired to investigate that place for some spooky little ghosts. We then go to sleep and wake up in the office. So, remember how I said I hated tip boxes? Yeah, this game has a bunch of them. If players want to know how to play the game, why put these in the first place when we just played through a tutorial? It's not like this is new information either. This is just old facts but rewritten in a different way. Anyways, the location is pretty well designed, and visually, this is the most impressive office I think I've ever seen in any FNAF fan game ever made. And this isn't something I'm saying lightly since we played through quite a few fan games throughout the lifetime of this channel. I'll talk more about the graphics later on, but for now, let's just focus on the gameplay. It's very simple, but it can be quite difficult when trying to understand it for the first time. We aren't limited by time like most other FNAF fan games, which uses the whole 6 AM feature to cause players to worry about just surviving. Instead, this is just a game that is more goal-based. For night 1, there are 2 ghosts that we have to worry about. When one possesses an animatronic, we have to find out which one it is before we simply have to call them into the office to, I think, exorcise them? I'm not sure how it works, but they get rid of the ghost somehow. Afterwards, we get to our left to throw out the broken animatronic chip and replace it with a new one. This repair section is pretty cool since we literally had to go to this animatronic who was once possessed and replace it by hand. Though, I wish they changed this for each animatronic since every single repair section is the exact same. No matter which animatronic, no matter how tall, no short, it gets really repetitive later on though. With the animatronics being quite unsettling, this was something I did enjoy for a bit. I'm not sure how, but realism is something this game is amazing at. Almost like these locations and designs just took a picture of a real life place. At points, it seems more like a live action movie rather than a game. For the first night, like most FNAF fan games, there wasn't really that many issues at all. Simply look into camera systems to find out which one was possessed, though the only animatronic who doesn't appear on the camera system is a puppet who we could tell is possessed by the music box. If the music box room is showing signs of a ghost, then we simply have to go on a laptop once again, just like the other animatronics. An issue I did have was the ambience. It is mostly devoid of any kind of sound, and sounds can be made disturbing and creepy, especially matched up with this kind of environment, but it felt too empty and it didn't feel like I had to worry about anything hunting me down. For example, in the Return to Bloody Nights, there aren't that many sounds either, but there is the sound of Fredbear 2.0 basically trying to taunt you, and the puppet's bells behind us. This not only makes you worried about these 2 animatronics, but also understanding that the other animatronics are constantly trying to hunt you down so you never feel safe. However, here, there's not really anything that makes you scared. Nor do you actually worry about the animatronics coming to you. Now, once you beat the night, you will know how fast you did it since, like I said, this game is objective based, not time restricted like most other FNAF fan games, which is when we make it to night 2. We once again get to talk to Paul Bear, who asks about our first night, which leads us to finding out that Juniors isn't haunted by multiple ghosts, but instead only one, who's been there for a while. Since ghosts can go into the real world, why can't Paul Bear? Well, his explanation is that he's too scared to and hid in his costume for way too long. Basically, a ghost afraid of other ghosts. Her. We don't know who, but this mysterious ghost, just called her for now, is the reason why Paul Bear can't move on, who also seems to be extremely violent, but since we are a brave investigator, we will be able to get rid of her for once and for all. Now, the gameplay loop of this game, I can understand why a lot of people didn't like it. Graphics wise, it was absolutely stunning. No one can argue that. However, its gameplay was extremely boring at times. Don't get me wrong, being able to look at the camera systems and look around was amazing just due to the fact that almost every location you were looking at kind of looked like a real life area. The graphics were that realistic to me that gave me an odd sense of feeling as if I was the one at that location. If this game did anything right, the atmosphere was definitely up there. Though, from here on out, the nights are going to be extremely short, since it is the same find the ghost, repair the animatronics, and make sure you have more than 2 brain cells. If you do what you need to, you could really beat the nights in under 4 or 5 minutes. It's not that difficult. Though after night 2, we are able to stumble across these VHS tapes, which we'll be able to watch. So grab some popcorn, and let's watch this quirky cartoon. I absolutely love that little animatronic of Freddy walking around that appears to be with a robot arm, though what is happening is unclear as of now since he appears to be standing for some reason before something above him reaches out. Due to the shadows on his face, that's how we know. If there was an ARG simply based on these clay motion designs, I would genuinely watch them. Not only are they actually amazingly animated, but they're really unique. This kind of art style just works for this kind of horror series, and I would love to see more just like it. Also, if the creator of this game ever watches this, please make these into plushies. I will buy them in bulk. Anyways, for the next few nights, I'll be mostly talking about our interaction with Fredbear and the tapes that we find since the gameplay is... well, it's just honestly repetitive. I thought it was only going to be me, but after finding out the reviews of this game, I'm sort of glad that it isn't a controversial take. After the second night, I decided to look at other fan reviews to see if I was the only one who was finding this game mechanic kind of boring, and like I said, nope. J King 26 quote, JR's isn't for me. Once you find out how the game's mechanics works, it gets monotonous. It feels like I was going through chores instead of playing a FNAF game. Which is exactly how I would describe my own experience while playing this game so far. It isn't really fun to say, but I'll describe this more when reaching the other nights. On this night, we tell Paul Bear how we found this VHS tape, which we assume is actually from the ghost herself, as if she's trying to leave this sort of message to us, though we currently do not know what it is. What we do know is that Freddy was carrying a piece of an animatronic to a door that said The Mangle, so maybe the ghost is trying to build herself a new body in the form of Mangle. Now, for this night, it was relatively simple as well. I forgot to mention the Balloon Boy, who we'll know is haunted if we look at his status bar in the animatronic stability menu. If it's glitching out, then we need to select him. I mistakenly said the puppet's the only one who isn't on the cams, but he's also nowhere to be found as well. This night has quite a few times that we need to find a ghost, 5 in total, before we're able to complete this section. Not before finding another VHS tape. This one appears to be Freddy staring at a picture of Mangle, almost panicking, with Bonnie across from him. Then it shows this funny little animation of the ghost that's possessing Freddy moving on to Bonnie. This is so adorable and I can't talk about how much I love this art style from this mini cartoon. Anyways, we at least know that there's only one ghost to worry about who is hopping from one animatronic to another. With this, the night ends before we get to night 4. Paul Bear isn't in his usual area, and it seems to be atop his ladder. Climbing it will reveal this cutscene. We're running out of time, we say. So Paul Bear gives us some advice. What if we invade the thing that she's trying to protect for some reason? The Mangle. Night 6 will go to the basement in order to find it. But for now, it seems like a pretty sad and wholesome situation. This dopey, weird looking Paul Bear looking at you and saying they don't remember when they had someone to talk to. We don't actually know how long it's been since this thing was trapped in its place. Months? Years? Decades even. It's a weird visual using the brain as the moon, but something oddly calming, especially with the silent ambience in the background. We look up together before fading to black. Like I said, I'm going to be skipping these nights since there really isn't anything new for the gameplay. This night's VHS tape shows us Chica waking up to a lullaby playing in the background, dragging another part to the room with Mangle, which reveals that they are now able to move around slightly. I actually like the change in art style from the clay motion design to a realistic metal twitching. Not sure why they need to possess all the different animatronics though, if they could just use one to drag the parts necessary, but hey, it makes pretty cool cutscenes, so who cares? Moving on to the 5th night. Paul Bear seems to have found an entryway into the basement, which is where Mangle is being hidden. And that is all that's really said for this night. Other than that, the animatronics are much more aggressive, but with the same gameplay loop. And by aggressive, they don't really do much. Now, for my favorite part of these nights so far, the VHS tapes being found. It seems that we're looking at some drawings with some ketchup being dropped on them, with the animatronics are now all holding parts in order to give to the Mangle. I love this sound design also being used. Using their voice box sound effect all the way from the second game was actually pretty smart considering it's so iconic to just Mangle. Now, it's time for the final night. Night 6. Paul Bear asks if we're ready to go to the center of the basement, which is where we're going to be able to confront the ghost. She apparently made that location as a room for games of sorts in order to mess with us. Though Paul Bear wants us to capture her in the same room in order to trap her just to let them rot for, in his words, centuries. This is pretty dark. Not sure if he's exaggerating or not, but was he truly a ghost for nearly centuries? Who knows? Also, does this ghost really deserve to rot in this place for centuries? I'm not talking about Paul Bear, I'm talking about the ghost that's basically hunting us. Do we really know what their objective is or what their goal is? We don't even really know who they are. For now, we say our final goodbyes since this might be the last time talking to him before walking through that door. So I feel as though this is what the entire game should have been like. It's heavily taken inspiration from the second game with the hallway, 2 vents, mask feature, music box, and the power in the corner, as well as bringing back the time feature that most FNAF fan games had. To say that this was the first time I truly felt terrified in this game is the truth. At least for the first minute or so, as I just panicked with the sudden change of gameplay. When an animatronic enters our office, we need to quickly put on our mask and wait for them to disappear, and every so often open up the camera systems to wind up the music box. This was essentially just a redesign of the original FNAF 2 game, which isn't something I like to say. Whenever someone makes a FNAF fan game, yes, there could be elements borrowed since it's a fan game, but to make a gameplay loop exactly like the original felt uninspired to me, honestly. That is literally how most people need to play the second game, using the cameras only to wind up the music box, which was a criticism that many people hated about the second game, while also focusing on wearing a mask whenever an animatronic was near the office. Of course, with Withered Foxy being the only exception. There are 2 arguments that could potentially be said here, with one being, they're copying the first game, this is lazy, this is uninspired, but the second one could be that they were showing off how they were inspired by the second game and inspired by the series. However, this is honestly extremely disappointing since this is where we're going to be ending things off. The worst part about this is honestly the way the mask works, since in FNAF 2, if you put on a mask, usually animatronics will follow your face so you're staring directly at them. Here though, the only thing we see is if the animatronics are in the office with our mask on, is the lights flickering, so it ruins any fear within a section since lights flickering isn't scary. We really don't see the animatronics at all. Around 2:30, the computer will pop open, showing the conveyor belt controls with a bunch of sticky notes on it, saying things like beware the mangle, don't make this more difficult than it needs to be, and you know you can't be here. Showing all the animatronics also entering the belt at the same time, with the music getting more and more intense. Until we see Mango and their parts also entering the line as well, before Mango's voice box can once again be heard. It seems as though the normal animatronics have almost sacrificed their own parts in order to help the Mango become complete, as they disappeared after entering the conveyor belt. With the change in intensity for the music, you will now need to really look at the camera system to find out where Mangle is. Now, if Mangle is within a hallway, we simply need to flash our light at them to cause them to run away. The room itself becomes jumbled with various different things as time progresses. There's also the ghost that will now appear in the cameras who will need to flash in order to make her go away. Finally, a good reason to actually use the camera system other than to wind the music box. Although hectic, as long as we're consistent while wearing a mask and preserving our flashlight battery life, then we should be able to get through just fine. The 6 AM end seems to almost be like a reference to the original games. We then see a girl saying "let me in" before smiling quickly and then disappearing. Seemingly the ghost is now inside of her mind. Then this cutscene happens. We're now back in the Barrens, but it seems that we brought back an unexpected guest. The girl grabs Paul Bear. Quick pause, why does this actually make him look so squishy? I low-key want to squeeze him next. Anyways, she says that she was waiting patiently for someone just like us to mess up and bring her here, showing off just how powerful she is, knowing that we are behind her and not being able to touch her at all, before we hit her in the back of the head. Huh? Did we? Wait, she knows we were there, right? Did we just have this... Did we just have some sort of secret superpower, like some sort of magic stick, something at all supernatural? Paul Bear just said that we were different and bonked this ghost in the back of her head. Nothing really special, it just seems like we're an adult who is strong enough to whack a ghost child. I thought she was going to be this menacing supernatural entity, but instead was just a child who literally put her back towards us and expected us to just watch as she tore Paul Bear apart, I think? Like, she knew we were there. 100% she knew we were there, because she acknowledges us, so how exactly was she ever a threat? Am I missing something? I feel like I'm missing something important because this ending just doesn't seem good. She was dangerous because she was building this Mangle animatronic, so if she was possessing Mangle, she would have been a literal walking killing machine. But in his form, she's literally just a child, so honestly it would have probably been smarter for her to just be Mangle and deal with us, but to be fair, I don't think she could bring an animatronic to his place, since only our souls can enter, so she was essentially nerfed I think by entering the Barrens. Maybe that was the whole trap they were talking about, since like I said, she is just a child, who I think we just William Aftoned. we literally just William Aftoned her, and then we're the good guys. Yay. I think we're the bad guy in this situation, maybe? Where did we even get this stick from? I thought we couldn't bring things from the real world like the animatronics, unless the Barrens is just full of magic sticks for some reason. We know almost nothing about the situation at all too. Let me explain what I understand so far about this whole story. We were a private investigator who was hired to investigate juniors due to some recent tragic events. We then wake up in the Barrens, a place between life and death, only to meet Pallbear, who was a spirit that was hiding from Spooky. We don't actually know her name, so I'm just gonna be calling her Spooky to make things simple. As it goes, he could go to the living world and admits to us that the only reason he doesn't is because he's afraid of his child. For some reason, though the reason is unknown. Yes, we know that she basically wants to unalive him, but why does she do that? Also, he's a ghost. Couldn't he just possess another animatronic? It's not like she had Mangle the whole time. When she was building Mangle from Freddy, she could have possessed Bonnie and fought him. It would have been like a kaiju battle, but with animatronics. Whatever. He was scared. Gist of it, he was scared. She is also the reason why he cannot move to the afterlife, and I'm guessing he's the reason why she can't do the same? So we devise a plan to trap her, which I'm guessing is to make her enter the Barrens in her true form in order to attack her. But once we do that, we are literally just a human adult attacking a human child. Since I don't completely understand the logistics of this place and how it works, but I'm assuming all the supernatural powers she would have had disappeared, or at least the only power she did have, being the power to possess animatronics, was useless since there wasn't really any around. We think that Spooky here is a bad guy, but how do we know that for certain? I mean, William Afton, if you only played FNAF 1 and then 3, could have been perceived as a victim without understanding the backstory. In the minigames, we see him ripping apart the animatronics and then being scared when these ghosts appear, which results in him getting spring-locked failured, you know. Without understanding it with full context with FNAF 2, this could have been perceived as this guy taking apart these killer animatronic suits only to get haunted by them in the end. So without understanding the whole picture here, how do we know for certain that Pallbear isn't the villain? For some reason, both Pallbear and Spooky cannot move on to the afterlife. Something happened between these two, but what is clearly unknown. For all we know, Pallbear could have been the William Afton in this situation, and this girl is simply like the puppet, trying to finish off Pallbear in order to let herself rest in peace. It's not like we ever see her hurting anyone throughout the whole game except for Pallbear and you, the player who's trying to stop her from getting to him. Yes, you could point out that the VHS tapes show her possessing the animatronics and making them do things, but let's be real here. The animatronics aren't actually people, and there's no evidence showing that there are multiple ghosts in this establishment. So who knows? I thought they would have probably made Pallbear into a twist villain when I first saw him because of his wonky design, and because it's overplayed and twist villains are everywhere, but after a while it's pretty obvious he wasn't. I mean, if we take everything he says at face value, he really is scared of Spooky and is a timid person. Though we don't actually know his actual age, we could assume that they're a child just due to their height being much smaller and the way that they talk being a lot more childish. So that begs the question, why on earth would this child be haunted by this other child? I can make a lot of speculations, but truth be told, we don't really know. Yes, there are multiple videos making theories on the internet about this situation, but realistically speaking, those are just theories that don't really have any concrete proof, since this game doesn't really give a lot of explanations as to the relationship between these two. For all we know, they were playing in a playground and Pallbear broke one of her toys, making her have a lifetime full of rage against him. That would honestly make the most amount of sense considering how confusing the canon lore of FNAF can get. What's interesting to note is that JRs after this incident will go through heavy rebranding due to some recent events as well as the Fazbear Entertainment, spending a small fortune on newer animatronics, with it telling Jeremy, "Are you ready to be working?" Most likely the same Jeremy from FNAF 2. So for the timeline, this game is most likely before FNAF 2. Well, now that we talked about most of the story, let's actually get to the part that was pushing off for quite a bit. Holy, the character designs within this game was phenomenal, and honestly one of my favorites in any FNAF fan game ever made. Not just because of the higher end graphics being used, but just their designs as a whole. Some people could say that the animatronics aren't realistic due to how creepy they are, but have you ever looked at the earliest examples of animatronic designs from any restaurants that used them, especially Chuck E. Cheese in its early days? These things were nightmare fuel, if anything. If this location was taking place before FNAF 2, it most likely would have been before 1987, so it would have been actually quite accurate, which only makes me love these designs even more. Now back to the animatronics. The various different changes, such as giving Bonnie some glasses, making their teeth much bigger, making Chica fit more into the Sleepy Bird aesthetic, though this is honestly one of the most unsettling things I've ever seen, and Foxy being faithful to the more traditional design due to the weathered looks that he has. All these are amazing, and that's not to include the other two that we see before Night 6, being Balloon Boy, which is... wow. I never would have expected someone to make something like Balloon Boy into something unsettling. Genuinely unsettling, with the way they first changed it to be Balloon Baby, then causing his face to be uncannily sinister. I can't explain it, to be honest, but something about the design doesn't feel right. It's probably the fact that it's a human animatronic. The others are essentially just animals, so they look cartoonish, but this? With how amazing the graphics were, all these animatronics could have been taken by a picture in the real world, but Balloon Baby just seems too realistic, as if they didn't design him in a game but instead just built him up in a real life factory. The only design I don't really like is probably the marionette, since adding ears just made it look goofy, to be honest. Ugh. If it didn't have those ears in its design, it probably could have been one of the creepiest in my opinion, but I don't know, it just looks weird. Those are all the designs in a quote-unquote base game from nights 1 through 5. On night 6, we do get introduced to the withered animatronics, which I did enjoy as well, especially Withered Bonnie. My lord, Withered Bonnie looks so sick. I always enjoy the base design from FNAF 2, but this adds such an unsettling realism to it that it just adds to the creepiness factor, and oh my god, this might be my favorite design ever made actually. Once again, Balloon Baby just takes the cake in this game because yeah, he's just perfect with the cracked face. I hate Balloon Boy, but absolutely adored this design. I think I like this with the design of the puppet, but I'm not too sure. It's really the ears that are just throwing me off. Now, Mangle is a giant. They're one of, if not the biggest animatronic we've ever seen due to the ghost constantly adding parts to them. Its design is amazing with how detailed the parts are and how its face looks incomplete, having its jaw but no real head since the back of it is just the endoskeleton. It is a perfect design honestly, while giving some sort of origin story to Mangle. Now, I'm going to have to basically rant about how bad this game is, gameplay wise. Were the animatronics the most realistic and graphically advanced I've ever seen in any kind of FNAF fan game? Absolutely. They look like they were designed from a AAA studio, and generally are going to probably be always on my mind when looking at other FNAF fan games. Now the graphics are not the problem, in fact that's probably the main selling point of this game, but I wish they did something with it. Like honestly, the only time we really see the animatronics are in the extras menu. Other than that, in the camera systems which don't really show the animatronics in their entirety, and I guess the repair section. I really wished they decided to do something more. For example, in the original FNAF games, you would see the animatronics in a doorway and vents when you turn the lights on in those locations. My favorite example of this kind of feature would be in the Return to Bloody Nights, which also used the doors, but in a pretty terrifying way. Instead of the animatronics just being there, if you flash your light, they would pop up giving you a mini jump scare. So you will be able to see the designs in their entirety throughout the night. But in JRs, you never really see the animatronics at all. They were the main reason many people wanted to play the game, to see how they were going to add these amazingly designed animatronics within the gameplay. And when they actually played the game, it was honestly a boring, repetitive mess that wasn't really interesting. At least to me, since finding the ghosts in animatronics was a cool concept for the first 2 nights, but after that, it just felt kinda boring. They could have done what they did in night 6 and changed the gameplay each night, or even just on night 3 or 4 to make it feel different at least. That's not even mentioning the jump scares either, since they were pretty underwhelming as well. I feel as though they were really short compared to other FNAF fan games, and I would know since I lost quite a bit playing them on stream. I think I would have had a much better perception of this game if at least the jump scares felt terrifying or unique. Or maybe even if they were more frequent, since losing in this game was kind of hard. The story itself was pretty cool, I guess. Though after researching what other people thought about it, apparently Paul Bear is a crying child and Spooky is Cassidy, which Spooky wanted to hurt Paul Bear because he's the son of William Afton. I mean, that's pretty chill. Yeah. But like, I get Cassidy is this vengeful spirit, but wouldn't her getting trapped in the Barrens kind of make the rest of the FNAF lore maybe not make as much sense, since she would be disappearing completely before FNAF 2? And why would the crying child be only set free after Cassidy disappears? Does she have some sort of power to trap souls in the living world? If anything, wouldn't he have a vendetta against his older brother who literally murdered him? By putting him in the jaws of Fredbear? Also, Cassidy is literally a child who got William Afton in a tragic way. A child that somehow is able to create this elaborate plan to make Mangle to do something. I'm guessing she would know that the Mangle animatronic wouldn't be able to go to the Baron since it's a spiritual place. So was it just to scare the player? I don't know. I just didn't enjoy the plot all that much and wasn't really invested in it. The concept and location of the Barrens was actually a pretty nice place. The way the graphics changed to be this old-fashioned style was something I didn't expect, but the execution of it was just not that well made. Remember, this is all my opinions. If somehow you found this game to be the most fun you've ever had in a while playing a FNAF fan game, you do you. For me, gameplay wise, I was extremely disappointed multiple times. It's just the fact that they made these amazing animatronics but did absolutely nothing with them at all, and that makes me sad. There was so much potential that was just unused. It's not like there were limited ideas of what they could have done. Maybe do something similar to FNAF 3, where there was no doors, but there was this giant window in front of the office, so we would occasionally see the animatronics walking around in a clear view. Not only would this add to the fear factor, but also would show off the designs in a way that would engage the players. Keeping the whole gameplay concept since it's unique, I guess. I didn't enjoy it since it's repetitive, but maybe others did. All in all, I just wanted more of the animatronics. Not to mention that this was supposed to be a horror game, it didn't feel like one. How am I supposed to get scared when I don't really have anything happening to me? Especially when I don't see the animatronics clearly. And that isn't to say that the monster or person that's hunting you down is always supposed to be clear in order to be scary. There are plenty of other horror media within games and movies that hide the scariest aspect to add to the fear factor, such as in The Iron Lung, where you don't actually see the monster, but just the unknown part of it is what makes it terrifying. Here though, the main gimmick of this game is that there's these amazingly designed animatronics, so show them more to make me scared. I just sound like a broken record at this point, so let's just move on. The VHS tapes were honestly my favorite part and something that I really enjoyed as well. The art style and storytelling of them was so fascinating that I kinda wish they would continue to make a video series just based on them. So to basically give this game some ratings, somehow how I feel about it. The graphics were a 12 out of 10, blew any other FNAF fan game out of the water, no competition. Gameplay though, it was a 3 out of 10. Boring, repetitive, and I guess Night 6 was different, but that was just FNAF 2 with more steps. The story was 4 out of 10, I guess. since it wasn't that engaging nor that interesting to me. The best way I could describe this game is honestly a work of art that meant nothing. Imagine a painting, so beautiful, so mesmerizing, honestly the most engaging work of art you've ever seen, but behind all that beauty is nothing. No meaning, no actual concept to work off of, it's just pretty with no substance. Sure, you could look at it for hours, but once you leave, you don't really think about it since there's nothing that truly stands out within it. This game, Juniors, was nothing more than a disappointing, pretty masterpiece. I hope if they ever decide to make a sequel or another FNAF fan game that they decide to stick to the art style used, but just in a way that actually showed off the animatronics within the game much more, and not just in the extras menu. This honestly probably would have been better to just watch someone else play it since I didn't really find it fun. No hate to the creators at all, it was very obvious that this was a project that they felt very passionate in due to how much dedication they put with the art style. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching all the way to the end of the video. If you like this video, like and subscribe. Comment how you feel about this game down below. Remember, everything I said was just my own opinion. I could be wrong according to you, so let me know how you feel. In the meantime, I've been talking for so long, so I'm going to go take a nap. Peace.